Hi, and welcome to week number 23 of my 52-week series of Scrappy blocks. My name is Lori Dickman, and this channel is Quilting with Lori, and today I'm going to be sharing with you how to make this beautiful Scrappy heart pillow. This is a foundation piecing. I am using actually a paper piecing is what I'm doing, or you could actually draw this on a fabric if you wanted to, muslin or whatever you might have available, but I do have a PDF of this heart. It's attached in the description box below, so definitely download that. And we're actually going to use this heart to use our strip piecing method and create this really fun heart pillow. So let me show you how this is done. I'm going to give you a close-up here of the pillow. Can you see some of the embroidery around the outer edge? And I have quilted the heart, and it's stuffed with a little bit of extra batting. So I'm going to show you how to do all of that here, and I'll use some specialty designs on your sewing machines where you can actually applique the heart onto the pillow. So if you look at my tabletop here, I have a few things. This is going to be my 12.5-inch background square. It is a light, it's got a few little designs on there. But it's a 12.5-inch square because this is actually part of the 52-week sampler quilt. So you could actually use this in your sampler quilt if you want, or you can go ahead and make it into a pillow, and I'll show you that. I've also got some pieces of batting here that I'm going to use to for the quilt, for the pillow itself, and I'll show you how we're going to work with those. But first of all, I want to make sure that you download the PDF. And we're going to use this to actually stitch on when we make our strip of the beautiful heart. And what we're going to do, I've got a bunch of strips here. Many of them are 1.5 inches wide. Some of them are 1.25 inches wide. Some might be 1 inch wide. It doesn't matter. Whatever you have in your strip stash, just grab those and let's start having fun placing them on here. I did cut some of these out. I already went through my strips and I started cutting them into different lengths. Basically, we want to make sure as we're covering this that the strips are going to be long enough to cover the actual design. And when we actually start sewing these strips onto this paper, we're going to be doing it on the back side. And the nice thing about this is the the line is quite dark, the heart line is quite dark, so you can actually see it through the back. But you're going to be placing your fabric on the back, ensuring that you're covering all of the front of the heart, and this peak is like this. And you could simply take a couple of pins to make sure that it doesn't move, and we'll pin it down. But the first thing I want to do is add my second strip to that. So I'm putting it right sides together. I am going to pin it there and pin it here. So I've pinned it, and when I stitch across that, I'm going to be stitching a 1/4 inch seam allowance right across there, and that will end up, and then we'll open it up. You'll see what I mean here in just a minute, but first of all, you're just going to place these two strips together, right sides together, and I'm simply covering up the bottom about 1 inch of this heart. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch from here across. And I want to make sure that I go across these lines here. And for this particular project, you can actually go beyond those lines. Typically when you are doing paper piecing, you want to stop right on the line. But in this case, it doesn't matter if you go beyond that, and you'll see why here in a few minutes. So I have my scraps of strips there, and here is my project, and I am going to stitch 1/4 inch right here. So I'm going to bring it over to my sewing machine, and I want to make sure you can see what I'm doing. Let's see, hopefully you can kind of see what I'm doing there. And once I pull it off of here, it'll make more sense because you'll see exactly what I have accomplished. All right, I'm going to take the pins out. I'm going to use my finger, and I'm going to finger press it straight up like this. So there we go. And I have 2 strips done, And it's kind of hard for you to see, but I can see through this, and I can see that it's covering beautifully the back side of this, so that is important. I'm going to continue adding strips along here. I've got another one cut here. And once I've pressed it, making sure that there are no folds, I'm pressing it with my finger, making sure there's no folds in that seam allowance. And then I'm going to center this on here. I think I'm going to bring my light down here further too, so that you have better light to see what I'm accomplishing here. I think that's a little bit better for you. All right. Again, I've laid these strips right sides together, and you may not be able to see it, but here is the heart line and here is the heart line. I'm going to sew 1/4 inch right along there. And when you're doing paper piecing like this, use a smaller stitch, maybe a 2.2 or a 2.0. That's a good thing to do. And now I'm, again, finger pressing that open, making sure that I don't have any creases in there. So now what I'm seeing right here is that I've sewn this too short, so I'm going to have to remove this. This line is coming out, the heart is coming up that direction, so I'm going to have a gap there. So I've not done that properly. I've brought it too far this direction. I need to remove this and move it over so that this strip does in fact cover this. In fact, I might want to just grab a different one that's longer, and that will just ensure that I'm not missing and causing any gaps on that. So I'm going to rip this out real quick. I'll be right back. All right, so I fixed this strip. I moved it over so that it was definitely covering the heart in the back there as it needed to. And now I've added one more strip, and this one I made sure that it was plenty long enough. It extends well beyond the page, and you can see that. I can see, you probably can't, but the heart, I can see the line of the heart coming up here, and this line of the heart is coming up there. So I'm doing good. Everything is covered there. And now I'm going to add another strip. Let's grab this one here. And with these strips, they can be any width. They don't all have to be the same width. You can have some of them 1 inch, some of them 1.5, if you want them 2 inches. Whatever size you prefer, that is just fine. And again, every time that you finger press those, make sure that you're not pressing any folds in them. All right, so I have those 2 strips right sides together, and again, I'm on the wrong side of the paper as I'm stitching, and I can see the heart below here. I see the line to ensure that my strips are definitely going to cover that heart. And I'm stitching 1/4 inch seam allowance here, going beyond that heart line. And now let's see, when I move it up, how does it look? Looks great. So you're probably not going to be able to see, but the heart line continues right there, and I've got plenty of fabric there. The heart line is continuing right here. I've got plenty, oops, but I missed the seam allowance here. So this is another thing. You have to make sure that this apparently moved as I was stitching here. So I need to remove that, bring it back, and ensure that I'm covering and catching the seam allowance there. So something moved there. That's not good. So I've got to fix that. Let me remove that, and I'll be right back. So you'll see that I fixed that. I'm just using a variation of pinks and burgundies, and some are kind of a salmon color, just making it really scrappy. The goal here is to use the scraps. So I've just gone into my stash and found some scrappy lengths of fabric, and that's what I'm using to do this paper piece project. So again, I've lined up another strip on top of that one there, right sides together, sewing 1/4 inch seam allowance across that shape. And again, I'm able to see the heart lines below through the back of the paper. And I'm just ensuring that everything is covered. I'm using my finger to finger press this forward, and so I'm getting quite a bit of it done. I do need to cut some more strips. I haven't cut enough. And for the top of it, for this section up here, I am simply going to run long strips all the way across. I'm not going to start and stop. I'm simply going to continue running the strips all the way across, and you'll see why here when I get this heart finished. So I've cut some more strips, and again I'm just going to continue to sew all the way across. Even though there are actually 2 points or 2 peaks on this heart, I'm not going to start and stop. I'm simply going all the way across. And then I'm going to flip it up, finger press, make sure I don't have any folds in that. And then let's see, I think I'll go with, I guess we'll go with this one right here. Again, right sides together, stitching 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way across. My machine is making an awful lot of noise here. I think I need to pull it apart and get it cleaned. And here we go. Now I can see that there is just a tiny little bit of the humps in the back of this heart that have not been covered by fabric. So I am going to add 1 more strip, and I'm probably going to make this seam allowance a good 1/2 inch, just so that when it flips up you can actually see some of this pink. So you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a minute. All right, there we go. All right, so these are all of my strips that I have sewn on to the back side of the heart. Now we're going to cut out on the heart. Actually, before we cut on the heart, I am going to do a straight stitch around the outside edge of that heart just to secure everything down. Make sure that all of your fabric is laying down and not flipped back where it shouldn't be. And I'm going to stitch right on the outside of that black line. And I'm just going to go ahead and go all the way around the heart. So what I am doing now is simply cutting about 1/4 inch seam allowance around the outside edge of that heart. I'm going to just cut right up to that stitching line there, and then continue cutting 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then I'll move that all aside. And then what we are going to want, so here's my heart. There it is with a little extra seam allowance around the outer edge. I need to now start getting rid of the paper. And as long as you've used a smaller stitch for your seams, like a 2 or a 2.2, you should very easily be able to get the paper out. But right now is the time that you're going to go around and just remove all of the paper from within that heart. And just grab it between the stitches there and just start ripping. It's kind of a fun job to do when you're maybe watching TV or something, just to get all of the paper removed. It's kind of fun to give it to the children too. That's a job that sometimes they enjoy doing. So I'm not going to make you watch me do all that, but I am going to remove all of the paper, and I'll be right back. One other item that you're going to want for this project is a piece of lightweight fusible interfacing. And you're just going to want to draw the heart around that shape on that fusible interfacing. And then what we're going to do, you're going to have the shiny side or the adhesive side facing you. You're going to lay this on top of the heart. Take it to the sewing machine and sew on that line that you had sewn earlier. Just follow that line. We're just going to completely enclose this heart, and then I'll show you how we're going to turn it so that this heart is actually faced nicely, and then we're going to press it. So let me stitch on that line, and then I'll be right back. So I have taken my fusible interfacing and I have sewn the wrong side of the heart to the wrong side of the fusible, and I've just used that same stitching line and it's stitched all the way around. My fuse, my sticky side, is sticking up on this side. I pulled this away and cut a slit in there so that I could actually turn it, and that will allow me to face this heart. But before I turn it, I do need to just get rid of this excess fusible. So I'm just going to simply cut around the outside here and just get rid of that excess fuse. There we go. So that is gone. Get that out of the way. Now I can turn my heart. So my heart is going to have nice finished edges. So you can use this heart just as it is, and you can applique it to the center of your block, or you can add some extra batting underneath the heart to make it a little bit more poofy, which is what I did on my pillow. I'll show you how I did that. All right, so I'm going to fix this. I need to go inside the point of the heart and cut right down to the stitching line, not the stitching line, but right up to the stitching line, so that it will turn nicely. There we go. And then I am going to take it over to the iron and I can press it. But before I press, because I want this heart to have batting in there, I don't want to press it yet because that will secure the batting to the back side or the inside of the heart. And I want my batting to be inside there. So I'm going to cut a piece of batting that's a little bit smaller than this heart, and then I'm going to stuff it in there, inside there, and then I will actually press it down. And then what I'm going to do as well is do some fun quilting along this heart, maybe along the stitching lines or whatever kind of quilting you want to do for your heart before you actually applique it to either your block or your pillow. So let me get my heart batting cut out and I'll show you how I'm going to add that in there. All right, so I think you can see this here. Let me move that out of the way. So this is the batting that I'm going to put inside my heart. And what I did is I just put it up in the corner there, and I took a marker and I just lightly marked this part of the heart here. Now I'm going to cut that out very quickly, just cut it out. And then I'm going to stuff my heart with this batting. And then I'm going to do some fun quilting over the heart. So there it is. Here's my heart. What I'm going to do is put it inside here. Kind of sticks, so it's a little tricky to get it in there, but just keep maneuvering it and you should be able to get it in there just where you want it. It gets hung up on the seam allowances in there. But eventually I'll get it all laid out. Let me fight with this. I'll get it laid out and I'll be right back. All right, so I have my batting in there and I have it pressed. I wanted the fusible to be on the inside, so the fusible is actually adhering to the batting, which is on the inside, and I haven't fused it really hard, but you can tell that it's fused in there. You could have attached your fuse the opposite, so that the fusible part was right here, and this was the sticky part, and then if you wanted that just to be fused onto the background square, or the square that you're going to be using for your pillow, you could make sure that this was creased there so you could find the exact center, and then you could simply press this to the background and your fuse is right here and it's going to fuse right to the block. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. Depends on your goal and what you're ultimately looking for. But I just wanted my fuse to be on the inside with the batting there. And now what I'm going to do before I actually stitch this to my background, I'm going to do some fun quilting right on the heart itself. So let's go back over to the sewing machine and we'll do some fun quilting over there. So I've attached my walking foot, and this time, and I'll show you the pillow and how I quilted that, but this time I'm going to actually just circle some inside hearts. So the first heart that I quilted was about 1/2 inch inside from the outer portion of the heart, and now I'm stitching another heart about maybe 3/4 inch inside that first line of stitching. And we're going to just continue around. There's so many things you can do. You can follow the lines of the strips of fabric. You can go at a diagonal. Just whatever your heart desires. Just have fun doing some quilting. I'm slowly going around these curves here. Back up a few stitches. Okay. And here I've got 2 lines of stitching, and I'm going to go ahead and do another line of stitching. It's not even on each side, and I don't care. I think that's just kind of fun. It's very organic. So I'm going to go ahead and do another line of stitching in there, and then I think it'll probably be complete. So I will finish that and I'll be right back. So here is this heart, and the edges are finished. I could simply press creases. I'm sorry for moving the camera there. I could certainly press creases in here to find the exact center of this background square or pillow, depending on what you plan to make. And then I'm going to center these 2 lines on those creases, make sure it's about even here. And I could simply applique that heart onto that square, and then it could be part of my sampler quilt if you choose to do that. If you would like to make a pillow, what I did at this point is I grabbed another batting, piece of batting, and a 12.5 by 12.5. This is a little bit bigger, but that's okay because as you're quilting, it can kind of change things. Can kind of sometimes it will shrink in size when you're doing a lot of applique. But this is what we could do now. So you'll notice on this one, I actually did diagonal quilting on the heart itself before I attached it to the pillow. When I attached it to the pillow, before I did any quilting on it, I did an applique right here. As you can see, it's a very pretty, fancy stitch on my sewing machine, and we often don't use those fancy stitches. So whenever you do applique, try and use a fancy stitch. It's a great opportunity for you. So that's what I did before I actually did the quilting on the pillow. I just appliqued the heart here, and then when I started the quilting, I secured it first of all by stitching around that applique, the heart shape, and then I did this straight line quilting on the batting in the background square. So let me show you that. First of all, we're going to find the center of this, and then we're going to applique it just to the background square first. So the first step is just to get this heart appliqued to the background square first. So I'm going to go over here to the machine and find a fancy stitch that I like, and I'm going to also include my set my machine up with this pretty variegated thread. So I'm going to do that, and we'll get going on the applique stitch. So I've just shared a photo with you of the stitch that I'm using. It's number 51 on my machine. Just a simple little fancy stitch that I'm going to use to applique this heart onto my background square here. And I'm going to eventually make this into a pillow again so you can see how I've done it. I am centering, I'm going to bring this over here so that you can see. As I'm stitching, I want to make sure that my needle is lined up, the center of my needle follows the line of the edge of the heart. And that's what I'm going to follow all the way around. My needle will then pop off to the left and to the right. At the center of that line of stitching is going to follow right along the edge of this heart. I'll get it going here a little bit, and that way you can kind of see what I have. There we go. Maybe you can see that. Let's bring it down farther. I do have a variegated thread. It's rather light, so you can't see it real well. You can see it better on the side where the heart is. But just a fun little fancy stitch. So do use those fancy stitches whenever you're appliquing. I have my walking foot in yet. That really helps, especially since the heart is kind of thick. And I've got it pinned in certain places, and I'll remove the pins as I continue around. But I'm going to go ahead and finish appliquing all the way around this heart, and then I'm going to show it to you in a close-up so you can actually see it better. So hopefully you can see the applique stitches there. I've brought my light a little closer. And it's just a fun, simple little stitch all the way around the heart. So I've got that done. Now I am going to add the batting to the back of this. I'll center it and pin it down in the edges. And then I'm going to, again, with my walking foot, I'm going to do some straight line stitching. Or maybe in this case, because I did straight line stitching on this pillow, I might do some circular things. I might just echo that heart. I think that's what I'll do. I'll echo the heart on the quilting for this particular pillow. So let's take it back over to the sewing machine and see how that's going to work. So I've done the first echo stitching around, and I'm just using the side of my foot. I lined it up with that fancy stitching, and I'm going to again line up my foot and just continue echoing around this heart and see what it looks like. I think it's going to turn out rather cute. Again, I'm using my walking foot. I do not have the quilting bar adapter for this machine, but I'm just using the side of the foot to guide myself as I'm going around here for the echo. And the walking foot really helps as I'm working through fabric as well as batting. I'm using a variegated thread. It's a pink with some white running through it. And I really like it. It's turning out well. So I'll continue doing this with every heart that I make. I'm just going to continue to move my needle out another length of the foot here and continue echoing all the way around. I'll show you when I'm done what it looks like. So here is the finished block that I've quilted in the Echo quilting. I really like it. I think it turned out very well. And this is going to now be made into a pillow. So I'm going to trim it up and remove this excess batting. I'm going to square it up to a 12.5-inch square, and then I'm going to get some backing and go ahead and sew the backing to this so that or actually it'll be a facing so that I can create the pillow. So let me show you how I'm going to do that. So I'm going to trim away this excess batting here from this block that I have just appliqued and quilted. And then I'm going to cut a 12.5-inch square that I'm going to need for the back of the pillow. All right, whoops. So there's the front of our pillow. I'm just going to use this backing to cut my 12.5-inch square. It's the same thing that I had used for this pillow. So I'm going to use the same fabric. I'm going to cut that out, and I'll be right back after I cut that out. 12.5 inches here, 12.5 inches for this one. Now that I have this squared up nicely to 12.5 inches, and I have my back of my pillow, cut to 12.5 inches. I'm going to put them right sides together, and I'm going to pin these edges. I'm going to leave this edge open between these two pins, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around the rest of this pillow. So let me just put a few pins here so that things don't move on me as I go over to my sewing machine. But I'm going to start at one of these two edges here, and I'm going to leave this open for turning, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. I'm going to go do that. I'll bring the pillow right back so you can see what it looks like. So I've stitched 1/4 inch all the way around the pillow, ending here, beginning here. I'm going to cut these at a diagonal in the corners just to get rid of some of that excess fabric. And then I am going to turn the pillow. So I'm going to put my hand up in here and grab this and turn it around. Bring my point out there. Bring my point out there. I'm going to go in here. Got that point. Now let's get this one. All right. There we go. So the pillow has the back now. I'm going to go and get some my polyester stuffing, and I will stuff the pillow, and then I'll simply hand stitch it shut, and that's what I had done on the bottom of mine. I simply did a slip stitch all the way along that from about here to there. I did a slip stitch and sewed it all shut. So I will have two fun little pillows that I can use for Valentine's Day. And this one you can see I did echo quilting all the way around. This one I did line quilting, diagonal on the pillow, straight line on the pillow. It's diagonal on the heart, excuse me, and straight line on the pillow. Just a real fun project. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining me today as I worked on our week number 23 of our foundation or paper pieced Scrappy Block heart pillows. I hope you'll make them. I'd love to see your pillows or your blocks, however you plan to use them. Please be sure you post them out on my Facebook group site. It's the Quilting with Lori, Scrap Up Your Stash. The link will be in the description box below. Don't forget the PDF for this heart will be in the description box below. And I really enjoy watching what you're all making. It's inspiring to see things that you post out on my Facebook site. And please don't forget to comment. I love to read all of the comments from my viewers. So don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. And we'll see you this coming week as I present part 2 of the Log Cabin on Point quilt. So you want to make sure you stop back for that. And then again next week for week number 24 of my 52-week series of Scrappy Blocks. So you can use up your scrap stash. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you soon. Happy quilting.